you're out there, you're riding, you're having a good time, and taking in the outdoors.
The fight isn't over. The fight is just beginning.
First kick. What's going on, guys? Right now I'm riding a 1966 Yamaha twin jet. I believe the model name is YL1. It's a 100cc two-stroke. Everything with this bike is very analog, not digital, very mechanical. Everything is cabled, not hydraulic. Very primitive machine. The metallurgy is not nearly as good as they are nowadays, although back in the day this was top of the line. Yamaha was a music company, and they had access to metals that were way more advanced than pretty much any other brand out there, because of all of the experimentation they had done for their musical instruments. And so they transferred that over to motorcycles and made some of the best motorcycles out there. Yamaha started in 1955. This is in 1966. So this is 11 years into them making motorcycles, and it definitely shows. There are some weird things with it. The transmission is really weird. You go down 4 and up all the way for neutral, which is a lot better than the transmissions before that were just, they would just cycle all the way through. And so you could go all the way down to 4th gear, shift down again, it would just jam into 1st gear. That didn't last very long though, so this is definitely a lot better than that. Everything about this bike is very primitive. It's almost like connecting to the internet in 1998, sitting there for 5 minutes listening to beeps, just beep, 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 boop. That's what power is like on this bike. You're just like connecting to the internet in 1998. You really have to wait for things to happen. This is all cabled. You have to do everything very deliberately on this bike in order to get anything done. It's not like a new bike where you think about shifting and it shifts. I mean, you think about using the clutch and you're using the clutch with extreme precision. This, not precise. Not precise at all. It wasn't uncommon for people to ride bikes that were 100 cc's. This is just a normal size bike for that day. It will do about 40 pretty easily. It likes to do 40, I should say. It'll do 60 or 65 though if you really wring it out. They don't sound like that anymore, especially on the street. All the street bikes nowadays pretty much are 4-strokes. This is a twin-cylinder 2-stroke. Very unique bike. And they were all real unique. They had a very interesting look to them back in the day. A lot of chrome, a lot of interesting designs. A lot of character to this bike. It's got a moped tire on it, so these tires are common, I just found out, but they definitely, they could be better. It feels like you're riding a bicycle. I mean, everything is very squirrely. This thing is very lightweight, even with its age, just because there's not much mass here. It's pretty lightweight. Look at this suspension, how the suspension works. I mean, this is just some serious, dude, you could hit some jumps with this thing. Basically just a spring. There's very little dampening in the suspension. Horsepower wise, it doesn't make very much, but it's all up on top. You really have to rev it up to the top, probably 80% of the rev range in order to get any power out of it. It has a points ignition, doesn't have electronic ignition, which is probably one of the most annoying things about this bike. So you always have to be adjusting the points every 200 or 300 miles in order for it to keep running pretty good. A lot of things just weren't refined back then yet. It just has a lot of metals on it that deteriorate pretty easily. The rubbers deteriorate pretty easily. You can't use ethanol gasoline for sure. Ethanol just destroys bikes like this because ethanol is so corrosive, and these old rubbers just can't handle it. So all the rubber pieces will just come all apart. The liner on the gas tank, everything will get completely demolished if you use ethanol gas in an old bike like this. Also, these aren't weatherproof whatsoever. You ride this thing in the rain and it will deteriorate very quickly. One of the big flaws is that the fork seals basically are a cup on top, and rain can just go right in there and just sit up on the seal until everything drops through, basically. So it causes a lot of corrosion. Little things like that they just didn't really consider. Even the Speedo isn't really waterproof. These days, no matter what bike you get, you could probably leave it outside every day the entire time you own it and it'd be totally fine. This thing, you wouldn't even want to do that once. You can hear where I'm keeping it in the power. That's where it really likes to be. Right where it gets up on top. Not too much beyond that. Kind of an interesting thing too is that, you know, the speeds that you can do on this bike are somewhat limited because you have to keep it in a certain rev range in order to keep going, in order to keep the engine pulling hard enough. So right now I'm doing about 25, and that's perfect for this gear. If I went up a gear, I'd want to be right at 40 miles an hour, and that's where it starts to pick up. If I had to, I could get on a highway and rev it all the way and get it up to 60, 65, but I don't like doing that on this bike. Listen to that engine. So unique. Alright guys, that's about it. I appreciate you stopping by. Hope you enjoyed this little review of the 1966 Yamaha YL1. Catch you on the next ride. Peace.